Here.
Councilor Terry Flynn.
Here.
Councilor Henry F. Lombardi Jr.
Here.
Councilor Angelisa Santos.
Here.
Councilor Dennis B. Serrano. Councilor Barbara A. Von Villas here. We have a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. The meeting with the planning board, joint meeting with the planning board and the and MeadAct. So I'll read the first one into the record. Number 2. You have to make a motion about the executive session.
A motion to move the executive session to the end of the regular meeting.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Number 2, memorandum of Paul A. Croce, Chairman, Middletown Planning Board, in reference to recommended joint meeting on proposed Atlantic Beach District overlay zoning.
Motion to receive said memorandum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and I'll also read number 3 at the same time. Number 3, memorandum of town plan in reference to proposed Atlantic Beach District overlay zoning, joint council, planning board, MeadAct meeting.
Motion to receive said memorandum and begin said joint meeting.
Second.
Okay, a motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr.
Okay.
President?
Yes,
I'd
ma'am.
like to recuse out of an abundance of caution, awaiting an advisory opinion from the Ethics Commission.
Okay. Please note, Councilor Flynn has recused herself from 2 and 3. Discussion on 2 and 3. Thank you, Councilor. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Peter. Peter's actually going to kind of clarify what we're doing here tonight as far as the meeting, joint meeting, and what the purpose is of it, and that kind of direction and looking for everybody's input and where we go from here.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Sean said I was coordinating. Ron said I was actually instigating the meeting. So, but
You know, this
Either way.
Peter, lawyers can interpret things different ways.
So this meeting came out of the discussion that was had, I think back in December, about the Atlantic Beach District, concerns that have been raised about zoning, and in particular concerns about there not being what some folks thought was an appropriate balance of uses, and specifically an over a preponderance of hotels being developed in the area, to the exclusion of maybe other uses such as retail, restaurants, etc. The council at that point decided, rather than adopting a moratorium, that what we would do is to take a look at the zoning regulations and perhaps try to come up with some specific regulations that would apply to the Atlantic Beach District, and try to bring the zoning more in line with the master plan for that district. So that's what the impetus for the meeting was. The rationale behind getting all 3 groups together is the planning board is the group that's tasked with preparing those zoning amendments. The council, obviously, at the end of that process is tasked with approving it, and MeadAct has just gone through the process of approving the TIF master plan for that district. So it made sense to get all 3 groups together at the front end, try to get some direction, see if there was some consensus on what the zoning overlay district might look like, so that when the planning board begins its work, hopefully at the end of that process, they can present something to the council that they've already had some input on and would speed the process along, because I know everyone wants to try to get this done as quickly as possible. And looking at this, and I've had conversations with the planner in terms of the components of an overlay district, and there's really 3 things here. One is trying to make sure that the zoning provides for an appropriate mix of uses. We have a situation now which is not unique to Middletown. Newport, other coastal communities are seeing a lot of hotel development because that's what the market favors right now. So how do we come up with zoning regulations that maybe shift things back a little bit and require a balance of mixes in the district? So that's number 1. The second component is really the dimensional requirements, everything from height to setbacks. And the third component would be really design. What is the look and feel of this Atlantic Beach District? What should that be? So that's really the purpose of the meeting today, is to try to get some feedback from all three groups so that the planning board can hit the ground running and hopefully come up with something that that the town council feels is appropriate.
Okay. Any councils have anything they'd like to offer? No? If not, I'll turn it over to Paul, see if you guys have any, the plan board has any.
Well, I'm aware of these documents that were prepared for the meeting that put forth some ideas and suggestions. I think it's good to review these with you and get your feedback on them at this point before we
Okay.
spend a lot of time on them.
Sure. And again, tonight, we're just absorbing, listening. We're missing two counselors, and I think it's only right that, you know, we're gonna make any decisions anyway, but we're certainly looking forward to what you have to say. And also, Mr. Silva, the participation from that group is critical as well.
I'm sorry?
The participation from MEDAC is critical as well. Because I think, you know, as discussions we've had, you know, there's hotels, some people don't want no more hotels down there, and what the people really want down there, what's the best uses down there, what do we want it to look like? This is a very unique, this is our first time doing anything like this, really, so it's very unique, a unique district. And here's an opportunity to really collaborate, you know, the MEDAC, the planning board, the council, and even zoning, and see what, to come up, to get this right. It doesn't matter how long it takes, we need to get it right. Because at the end of the day, it's what the people want to see down there and what's best for Middletown. So that's really what we're doing. So, Mr. Croce?
The first thing I want to mention is some guidelines that the planner put together for all of us to be aware of as we go into this. But what I really want to do is talk about these suggestions for an overlay district on this item that was prepared for this evening's meeting. I believe these suggestions originated with MEDAC, so I don't want you to think they, no?
No,
With an individual.
those are, yes,
You have to be.
No, that's not a MEDAC.
yeah.
I'm sorry. It's from a private citizen that were distributed. And I think several persons have seen them already, and the initial feedback is favorable, so I think it's good to put them before you to see how you react. The first of these is labeled Suggestion 1 on page 2 of this handout. Remove the flat roof option seen in section 521.2, Building Design and Architecture, D, Roof Forms and Roof Design for this district. These regulations emphasize 2 points. Architecture shall include traditional New England architecture, and because roofs have a dramatic effect on the appearance, focus on roof styles is important. This is the document that has the word suggestions in red at the top.
There's no left hand.
Yeah, ours is,
Item number 3, which says on the bottom.
yeah.
So looking at
Item number 3.
It's marked 3.
Good idea. Can I just interject a minute? Council Von Villa just had a good recommendation. These are, and we're going to certainly listen to what you're saying and the recommendations from this resident, but that's one person. And I'm not discarding that by no means, but I think we want to maybe talk about what we want this thing to look like. You know, I mean, because one person can make recommendations, and there's going to be a balance. MEDAC's going to come back and talk about maybe some financial impacts. But I think it's really appropriate to talk about what do we want this area to look like. Otherwise, I think we're just going to be spinning our wheels and get no traction here, and no direction. That's just my opinion.
On small things, fix this, but there's no overall picture.
Yeah. I mean, I know it was been said that there's not a lot of developable land down there, but I disagree with that. I think there's plenty of land that could still be subject to redevelopment. And so, you know, what do we've seen what's happened down there in the past 4 or 5 years. How much of the face of that area has changed. So I think the purpose of this is to see exactly what do we want, or some type of direction. What do we want this to look like? What do the people want this to look like? You know, so any recommendations are certainly open to that. You know, it's not right if the council just says, well, this is what we want it to look like, because we represent you. Do we all have our own opinion? Sure we do. But we need to collaborate together on what we want this to look like. Go ahead, Ron.
If I could, maybe it would be helpful just as an introductory part of the discussion, just go through a couple of points in the memo that I submitted to the town council, because I think this is where it's all starting is from that Atlantic Beach District Master Plan completed in 2007, which was then, I guess, incorporated by reference in the town's comprehensive community plan. So just a few things in the memo I submitted to the town council. Bottom of page 1, the economic development element within the comprehensive plan talks about the Atlantic Beach District Master Plan serving as the primary document guiding the transformation of the area into a vibrant, walkable commercial area, capitalizing on its relatively dense development pattern. It goes on to list the 4 major goals that were used as that Atlantic Beach District Master Plan was being drafted. I'm not going to read through each of them, but the 4 bullet points at the top of page 2. So that gives, I guess, a bit of a flavor as to what the town was thinking about when it had created that master plan and what it was looking forward to that district looking like in the future. Jumping down a little bit on page 2, one of the action items in the comprehensive plan talks about facilitating the implementation of the recommendations of the Atlantic Beach District Master Plan. And I guess I just, at this point, like to, I guess, back up for those folks that might not be familiar with the master plan. The bulk of that master plan has to do with public improvements within the district. Most of the document is devoted and dedicated to talking about the improvements to the intersections in that area of town, the streetscape improvements that we've been working on, recommendation about the undergrounding of utilities, and also improvements to the parks, Dunlop Wheeler Park, and then a proposed park at the end of Newport Avenue. So that's quite a bit of the master plan has to do with those issues. But then it does also talk about recommendations for land use in that part of town, which is where we're taking off from tonight. And Peter hit on some of the major issues that have been talked about already is things that come from the Atlantic Beach District Master Plan, such as allowing and promoting a mix of uses within the district so that it's not all hotel development. Talking about building design within the district. It specifically references maintaining access and views of Easton's Pond and the ocean. So those things are more general guiding principles, I guess, as we work forward now in this effort to draft an overlay district. As you get further down into the document of the Atlantic Beach Master Plan, there are some more specific items, such as wanting to eliminate the potential to develop uses that are not consistent with the master plan that specifically talks about development of heavy commercial uses, industrial manufacturing types of uses. So there is a little bit of a specific discussion in there about the types of uses that shouldn't be allowed in the district. So I think with that, I mean, that's where this is all coming from. We've obviously got a lot of interest in that part of town with the development that's been going on recently. And it's appropriate to have this discussion and get some input as to what direction the planning board should go in.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that's what the intent was tonight, based on, you know, some of the residents in that area brought forth, maybe they wanted a moratorium, and the council said that's not the way to go about it. You know, if you don't want development or more hotels, then let's see what we want this thing to look like.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
just,
as far as land use goes. I personally, it's just my own personal opinion, I have no issue with the streetscape and the design they came up with for that district. I think it's fantastic. But I thought this was gonna be geared more towards land use
Right.
and what, you know, is there gonna be a restriction on, no more hotels down there or that type of discussion, as I thought, based
And
on,
that- and
based
that-
on the two previous meetings we had, so that otherwise we're not gonna be making any ground here, and I didn't come here not to make any ground tonight.
Well, maybe that should be the focus of the discussion then, is on the land use
Yeah.
end of things, based on the amount of time that we have. And, you know, there are a number of options out there. One side of the spectrum to saying, you know, we're not going to allow hotels in this district. At the same, you can remember this is a hospitality district, and that's probably not consistent with the master plan. Or, on the other hand, perhaps requiring there to be mixed use in these developments. So whether it's saying if you're going to develop a hotel, you've got to provide a retail component, retail on the first floor, a restaurant use, or something of that sort.
Right.
So that's another option. So that might be something that the boards and certainly MEDAC, you know, the members might want to talk about and discuss where that line might be.
If I could put 2 cents in.
Sure.
On the positive side, we've had 3 completed developments there that I think are all additive to the area. Telly's Hotel, which has a place to have lunch and dinner. I think they did a beautiful job of that. Cumberland Gas Station is a huge improvement. And by the way, they put a fence in so you can see the water. It also has significantly improved the stormwater treatment on that side of the street. And on Wave Avenue, you've got a mixed use there that, again, that building has dramatically improved the water quality with stormwater. A lot of the issues that Mr. Bagwell has presented have been part of the discussions for consideration of the applications for the hotel. Most of us on the planning board are not really very excited about a flat roof, and we would like our hotels to look like they're from New England and not Phoenix, Arizona. So parts of his comments and suggestions are things that have been part of our discussions as we try to move forward.
Okay. Rick?
So,
Sorry, Council Lombardi.
it's fine. Thank you. So I think what I just want to say about this is I agree with concerns the residents have all along, and I still do. I think the vision, and that's a good word to use, is a vision for what you want to see down there, what we want to see down there, what the residents want to see down there is important. I think the mixed use piece of this is key, not just for this area, but that's going to be, what we're doing here tonight, what you guys are going to do should lay the groundwork. There are going to be other areas in town, and other neighborhoods, and other parts of this town that are going to be affected in a similar way at some point where there's going to be some development. But redevelopment is the key in my mind. Because as I walked down there the other day, I took a look around, and while everybody said, well, it's already built out, you can't put any more, there's very little you can do. That's not so true. And believe me, I can see pieces of property down there being sold. And if we don't have a clear path of what you want to see down there, we're going to be in trouble. I could see somebody going down there, what if another hotel in another place, and it's not going to look right. I think the restaurants and the retail and buildings that look nice, and to get away from the flat roof design, I agree with that, is important. So I think with this, don't buttonhole yourself at the end of the day into this piece, into that end of town, because you may want to use this as a footprint, a guideline for other areas in town down the road. It's coming, and we need to be aware and open-minded to that. So whatever you come up with can certainly be used as a guide to where we're going to go somewhere else down the road in this town. So I am 100% behind this. I think that's what we should be looking at, particularly the redevelopment piece of it, because we can get in trouble if we don't have a handle on it, and we kind of, look at it from that piece of it.
Peter, I have a question, or Sean. Does this, what are the building regulations currently fall under as far as aesthetics? Is it the commercial design plan that was adopted in 2006 or 2008 in that time? It is, it's townwide. Okay, that's what it falls under now. But this would be different because it'd be an overlay district. It'd have a separate set of rules, separate set of restrictions or guidelines, whatever we end up putting in there to make it look like what we want it to look like.
Yeah. So everything from the design to setbacks. Do you want the buildings to be able to be right up to the sidewalk with parking in the back? Do you want the buildings set back? There's examples of both in that district. And so, that's one of the questions that we'd want to take a look at as well.
Okay.
You know,
Yes, ma'am.
when you talk about the, sort of what the vision is for that area, I think when putting together the whole Atlantic Beach District plan and making a walkable village, I mean, it has the village concept, and part of it, there's multiple parts to a village. The reason that I think we've talked in the plan about it being a village concept is that it's bordered by really high-density residential neighborhoods. And the concept is that this isn't a pass-through neighborhood. This is a village where the businesses that are there are going to be of use and attract the residents to come down and partake in what's happening in that little village area, so that people don't have to get in their car and drive elsewhere to get a mix of services. Right now there's a beauty salon, a salon there, there's clothing, you can rent bikes, you can go to a coffee shop, you can go to restaurants. The idea is that we're creating a walkable, livable, year-round community there that is also attractive for visitors that are staying at the hotels. So, as we're looking in that limited business district that's also traffic sensitive, we really have to look at the limited business use tables to see what's allowed in a limited business district, because there's limited business districts all along our major thoroughfares. Some of them are appropriate for more industrial and manufacturing uses, but in the center of our village, we do need to really look at the kinds of businesses that we want to allow in that limited business district. So I know that you have the use table there in front of you, and there are a variety of kind of businesses that are listed in the limited business district that really are not appropriate for our village concept that we're trying to establish here. And as you say, these villages can be set up in other parts of Middletown where you've got limited business districts coming up, backing up to residential areas where services for the residences are important as the businesses and the pass-through business going in that area. But anyway, so we need to look at the use table and think about what we really don't want in the limited business district, in this overlay district for the Atlantic Beach District Village area. That's one approach. But it's also, taking a look at the mix of businesses. What's a really good mix of businesses to be in that area? So I'll let somebody else speak.
Thank you. Good comments. Betty?
Yes, I think I agree totally with Liz, and that we need a balance of local economic needs for various enticements that we can bring, like a drugstore in various places that people would like to walk around that area and see things. Of course, the parking is one of the big problems in that area. But I do think that we need quite a lot of mixed uses. We need to keep a view of the pond, and that is something that has been a little bit of a difficulty. We have to be careful how we verbalize things, but we do need, I think, some more guidance.
Mr. Silva?
Liz is correct. I printed out the section of the ordinance, zoning ordinance, that deals with uses, what's permitted and what isn't. It's 21 pages, plus or minus. And if you go to what the zoning ordinance says now, on the limited business, you'll see what is permitted by right, excuse me, what is not permitted at all, and what is permitted by special use permit. Keeping in mind that the overlay district applies to a specific type of area, which has a reference already in the comp plan and in its own report. Many of the allowed uses, either by special use permit or by right, really don't really fit into the village concept. I mean, for example, limited business by right, you can have a field crop farms and horticultural nurseries, including wholesale sales are the same. I mean, I think everybody would agree that shouldn't be there. And you go down and you take a look at the licensed kennels for the raising of boarding and care of dogs, cats, or other fur-bearing animals. That's by special use permit. That might not be appropriate at all. So instead of being an S, it should be an N.
Yeah, so if I could, Bob,
Yeah.
the planning board has a subcommittee, a use table subcommittee that we've worked on, and we've actually lost 2 of the members now, so I'm the only one left on the use table subcommittee.
Okay, Bill, you need to go rent the movie Last Man Standing.
Although for as long as I've been on the board, I think that's probably one of the best subcommittees that I've been on, or committees in general, because we're going through line by line. We're focusing on the limited business part of it. So we are, before we lost all our members, both of our members, we got through, I would say, Ron, probably 75% of it I was going to estimate. So we're close to that, and I think we've gone through that exercise of pulling out the uses that we feel are not appropriate, and that's something we'll present to the planning board as part of our discussions on whatever we go forward with. So I think we're in pretty good shape with the uses and what's appropriate in a village business or not, and so I'm pretty comfortable going forward on that.
But we don't have a category that's a village,
Correct.
kind of where the overlay
Right.
would apply not only to one specific
Right.
area, but to any time that concept of village were brought forward.
Well-
Yeah, so I think regardless of what we call it, it's the uses that we focus on, so we can call it whatever we want to call it.
May
But
not
the
be a village.
uses, it may not be a village, but
Right.
we want to take those uses and at least have that work done, so whatever we call it, we can plug those uses into, and I think we're close to that. I think we're close to getting that done.
And while it would be nice to have something, a concept, a village concept that applied in other locations, I think the focus right now should be on the Atlantic Beach District, because what's
Exactly.
appropriate in this
Yeah.
particular part of
Exactly.
town may not be appropriate in the agricultural village
No,
it's
area or some other spot. So I think the focus should really be on this particular district, and when we're looking at the
Yeah, I mean, I
uses.
think no matter, as Mrs. Drayton said, that you call a village, call it whatever you want, but it's gonna, as Rick said, it could be used in different areas of town, but it's gonna be unique to each area of town.
Right.
And that's really what we need to look at. Lee, can you get a mic, please? Thank you.
In talking about the parking, we looked at Aquidneck School that you could use in the evening, weekends, summers. So there's a parcel of people that could park there. So we did talk about that. And I did ask my fellow school committee members, and they said that that would be fine along with the administration. So if you want that, we can vote on it and say that you're able to use that on certain times.
Paul?
Yes, Bill,
If I could-
sorry.
If I could suggest maybe the use table subcommittee that I chair and sit as the sole member of, I think if we maybe concentrate on reestablishing that, or at least let's meet again and get that work done. that would be a good start for us to then propose, at least have
Okay,
something
so-
in hand. But we
so
need to
Bill,
get that done.
From a time frame perspective, you said you're about 75% done. What are you thinking? I mean, what would be a appropriate time for,
So we
a
probably.
reasonable time to come back and say,
Yeah.
make recommendations?
Sure, so we probably need a couple more meetings to do that, and then present to the full planning board and come out with a recommendation. We did have some questions on it, but I think we did focus on the limited business portion of it, so it wasn't like we were all over the map. We're pretty dialed into the limited business, so that will help, I think, for maybe this district. And I think maybe we go back to that committee and focus on the village part of it, or at least that in mind, so we can get that work done and then move forward with wherever we're gonna go with some type of an overlay, at least the uses that have been vetted by planning board members.
Right. So Peter, just from a process perspective, so there's a couple more meetings from a subcommittee, once they establish a couple more members, meeting of the planning board to agree on the land use recommendations.
I think the planning board would probably hold at least one or, if not two, public hearings to get input from the public with regard to any of the recommendations that they come up with before they provide them to the council. But what I would encourage is anyone else, whether it's on the council or MEDAC or the planning board, any other suggestions, and once again, focusing on the land use component of this. If for whatever reason, because of these market forces, we feel like the uses are out of balance down there, suggestions on how we might bring those back in. Does requiring mixed-use development, in other words, if you're gonna develop a hotel, requiring that to include a retail component or restaurant component, is that something that?
So let me ask you a question. So, is it or is it not the intent of the land use to come back and say, look, we should have only X amount of hotels down there?
It doesn't.
Or rooms down there. Maybe you make it rooms, because that was really what one of the issues were.
You could conceivably limit the number of rooms that are allowed in the district as a whole. It's difficult because, hotels are permitted by special use permit there. That means that hotels are considered to be an appropriate compatible use in that district so long as they meet the special use permit criteria, which makes sense for hotels to be allowed in a hospitality area.
Unless that was changed.
Unless it was changed. But the problem is the zoning board doesn't have the authority to say, you know what, we think there's enough hotels down here, or we think there's enough gas stations. They, that's not something that they can consider when an application comes to them.
Right.
So if we're gonna put limits on it in terms of numbers or in terms of number of rooms, that's something that would have to be done, established by the council in the zoning ordinance, or once again, if we want to make sure that we've got retail and other businesses there, to require it to be a component of any sort of hotel development. Whether it's retail on the first floor and the hotel up above, something along those lines.
I'd like to piggyback off what Bill was talking about and what Rick was talking about. We have another area in town where we're trying to develop a rural village district, and we're going right to the limited business use table. The members of the subcommittee are coming up with our recommendations, and the 3 property owners who have commercial businesses are also working on a list of things they don't want to see and keep and everything else. So I think that's the key to success, and you're right. We are looking at other places, and that use table is the way to do it, I think.
Okay. Mrs. Sanders. Sorry, Liz.
What I'm about to say, some of you may not like what I'm going to say. You've got to remember, once the land is gone, it's gone. It's gone forever. Now, we're talking about a village down by the beach. Who's going to go to this village? The people from the First Beach Land Company? That's the original name for Easton's Point. Are people from Oliphant Lane, from Oxbow, are they going to come down? Are we selling Middletown to the highest bidder? What's going to happen to when there's no more land? Our kids want to build in Middletown. They're not going to find land. You're giving it away, you're selling it away. What in the world is everybody thinking of? Hotels, hotels. The village is going to be catered to the people in the hotel area. People in Oxbow, Elephant Lane, East Main Road aren't going to go down. I'm certainly not going to go down there. I stay away from there. You try to go through Wave Avenue and you go to the very end, somebody cuts you off coming through the light. It's a death trap if you go down Wave Avenue. Just think about the land. The land is disappearing. Once it's gone forever. You're not going to get it back. You can't get it back unless you put dirt in this water to make land. It's gone.
Liz?
Can I ask just a question of Mr. Regan? In the, not being really 100% familiar with how zoning operates.
Liz?
Hotels are allowed in the limited business district by special permit. So what's the criterion for granting or not granting a special use permit?
Well, there are a number of them that it's not going to cause a hazardous condition, a nuisance in the area, have a negative impact on property values, on negative impact on traffic flow, parking, etc. But it's different from uses that require variances. Variances, you have to show some sort of a hardship in order to be entitled to a variance. You don't have to show hardship for a special use permit. So, you know, the example might be, there might be, a restaurant might be allowed by right in a particular zoning district. A restaurant with a drive-through might require a special use permit because there's an additional consideration to make sure that that drive-through is not going to have a negative impact on traffic and on abutting properties. So the use itself, if it's allowed by special use permit, is considered to be an appropriate, compatible use in the area so long as it's developed in accordance with those standards.
So could there be
And it also has to comply with the comprehensive plan.
Right, so the comprehensive plan is one tool for evaluating, one guideline, because it's only a guideline for evaluating whether a special use permit is appropriate for a particular area.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, are there any, special restrictions that you might put on, in terms of mix of uses in a particular overlay district where if something was crossing a threshold of percentage of, use hotels for example, that would be something which would be required by this when considering a special use permit?
It's not something typically that the zoning board, would have discretion over. It's really something where, these uses are either allowed by right, by special use permit, or they're prohibited. Those are essentially the three categories, and we can deal with the size, the location.
Peter, the standards, Liz, I think maybe for her benefit, the standards that she's asking about, that when people ask for certain uses, and I really think uses govern just about everything that we do. Those standards are set by state law, am I correct? Those can't be changed. So if you're thinking of going into adding standards that they have to meet, we can't go there. But the zoning board has the ability, and we have the ability on the planning board to grant waivers, to grant variances, and that's where their work is done. But we can't touch the standards that they have to meet. You asked what those standards were. Those are set by state law.
But the town does have the ability through the zoning code to set the dimensional
Restrictions.
requirements, the size,
Right, so
the
that's,
number of rooms, and whether certain other uses have to be provided as part of a development.
right, and so I think therefore, in the, if you're looking at one of the suggestions made about flat roofs, and not allowing them in this particular district, is sort of the, the underlying intent of that is that, you're going to be restricting hotels basically because hotels benefit from a flat roof because that gives them floor area, and they can get more rooms into that
Yeah,
flat
and I don't know
roofed
whether
building.
that, I'm not sure that the intent of that is to restrict the number of rooms. That may be an
That's sort of a
incidental,
secondary-
a secondary
it's a secondary
consequence of that, as
consequence.
opposed to,
Sorry.
we want these buildings to look, as Art said, we want them to look like they're belong in New England as opposed to Arizona.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Got
at the
it.
end of the day, it's our town. And,
got it.
and, you know, we should direct it the way we want it to look and what we want there, no matter whether it's Atlantic Beach or any other area in town. It's our town. And so, you know, with the input from everyone, I think we can do that. And I think it'll come out nice.
You have to realize, however, what we're dealing with here is not an easy subject.
No.
This, and it's time-consuming, and it's not something where you have the magic pill. The town thought in terms of big boxes and said, we don't want any more big boxes. We want what's over in South County, mixed-use development. Well, the people that you have to look to are your professionals, Peter Regan, his
You mic,
office.
Mr. Silva, we can't
Yeah.
hear you.
You have to look at the professionals, and they've got to tell you what the zoning ordinance has to contain. But there's something beyond that. You can say, we don't want this there, we'll allow this there, we'll do this if it meets certain standards. But there's one element that overrides a lot of this, and that's the marketplace. People are not building hotels or restaurants in places where they're not going to work. So you can decide on what you want down there, but the marketplace will ultimately determine who goes. And when you make a situation so onerous for a developer or a person that owns property and wants to develop it for him or herself, it'll never happen. The mixed-use ordinance is a perfect example. That was put together to make sure that the 72 acres over in Browns Lane wouldn't get developed for big boxes. And it served its purpose. But I defy anybody who's a developer to come in and use that mixed-use ordinance because it just simply doesn't work. So you have to really spend a lot of time figuring out what the controls ought to be, and they have to be controls, but how effective they will ultimately impact what will go there. And we worked on that mixed-use ordinance for almost 2 years. And you're in a mini mixed-use ordinance right here. It's going to take you a long time to flesh out the issues. And whether any hotels will be built in the future down there, more than likely are dependent upon the market. Nobody's going to spend $12 to $14 million to build something if it isn't going to work. And no matter what you put in the ordinance, you're not going to get anybody to come down unless the marketplace says it's a good place to make a living and develop something. Nobody does it for charity. Developers have to have a bottom line. They've got to create jobs, and they have to bring in customers so that when they make money, they pay the taxes to the town of Middletown, and they pay their help and their employees.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the balance that you're talking about, but just because the market, it may work there for somebody, they might not necessarily be what the residents want there.
And the
You know,
residents
just like-
deserve to
just-
get what they want.
Exactly, exactly,
Yep.
so.
Mr. President?
But we also need to maintain the balance.
Yep, and that's a difficult task.
I think we can do it.
Very
Yep.
agreed.
And so how do you do that so that individual property owners, you know, are able to develop their properties, but within certain, you know, sort of
Parameters.
guidelines and parameters that we as a community, you know, we have to keep going back to the comprehensive town plan as sort of our overriding and our guidebook to how we, it's sort of more of a vision document than it is a rules and regulations document. So I think the vision has been articulated many times, but the rules and regulations don't necessarily
Line up with it.
help the vision happen.
Perhaps I should ask Ron, has there been a rural village-type overlay district prepared in any other city or town in the state of Rhode Island, or for that matter, anywhere else?
you have before?
There-
that we could look to for some guidance.
Yeah, we can look for some examples. There are overlay districts in many towns. Maybe not exactly what we're going to develop here, but there are examples of overlay
Right.
districts.
There is one in Coventry.
Coventry?
Yes, Coventry has a village concept.
I think it'd be helpful if we could gather those examples so we could read and find out how it's being done.
Mr. Silva, I'm sure you've been over to Wickford, and that's a beautiful little
South County, yeah.
development
I
over
passed
there.
it this morning on the way to my
Good.
doctor's
It's a,
appointment.
it's a lovely, lovely area.
Yep.
Now, let's go back to when I raised my hand and you said you didn't acknowledge me.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Santos.
Can I hit you?
I haven't sat in this seat in 11 years. I may be a little rusty.
I know you are.
All right.
All right, we've got the planning board here. You may deny something of a petitioner. It goes before the zoning board. They approve it. They approve it. So what is happening? Tell me, I want to know. You deny, it may not be 100% vote, but it is denied. It goes to the zoning board, in a matter of minutes, it's approved.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to talk about tonight, what we want to see, what the residents want to see, what the board recommends in that particular area where we can change some of the uses to make it look like what the residents and the people of Middletown want it to look like.
Well, it's a planning board who is making the recommendations. Are they taking suggestions from the residents on this?
They
What they're
will,
gonna have
as
is they're
as
gonna have
part
a
of the
subcommittee
process.
that goes out, and then the subcommittee will come back and make recommendations to the full board, and the board will hold hearings, or at least one or
Okay.
two hearings, and so that they can get public input, and then they'll come forward with recommendations once they're comfortable to the council.
You gotta keep in mind that the planning board does not always act as the final
I
determinant.
realize that, sir.
They are asked to act many times in an advisory capacity and send that
Correct.
opinion to the zoning board. Once it gets to the zoning board has a different set of facts and rules and regulations and what they have to find before approving something.
Is the zoning board always correct? No.
No,
Thank you.
I've taken them, like on the big box issue, I took them to the Superior Court and overturned the town on it. They weren't correct.
Okay, moving right along.
All
Mrs.
right.
Von Villas. We're gonna wrap up in like about 5 of.
I don't talk about
I know you don't. I know you don't.
Okay. I'd like to go back to something we started with at the beginning, and I would like to mention what seemed to work beautifully at MÉDAC, as the liaison to MÉDAC, which was the pictures of what the area would look like when we were attempting to get the TIF passed. Think about those pictures and how all of a sudden it became a living document. We understood what it looked like. Those pictures came to the council, and the council looked at it, and it was a living document for them, and they knew what it looked like, and they had no trouble supporting it. My point is, you on the planning board, okay, the zoning board, you guys are focused on the little things about fixing them. But the people out there, they need to see what we're talking about. They need to know what it's going to look like. What does this village look like? Don't tell me what this little building should look like, or whether it should have a flat roof, or it should be 15 feet back from the street. Don't tell me about that. It's too hard for the average resident, and I don't mean to put you down in any way, but quite frankly, I don't understand all the stuff that the planning board does. But the thing is, understanding what's happening and having a vision of what it is, and then move forward and make that vision happen. It doesn't take a lot of preparation, I think, to do some drawings and get, I don't know, Ron knows more about that than I do, because he certainly was responsible for some of the stuff that came forward. But people out there, they want to know what it looks like. They don't understand about roofs, this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm concerned about is that we're going to be so focused on the little individual pieces that we're going to have a mishmash of whatever and not a unified village. I'm done.
Thank you.
Pretty much
Very
sums
good.
it up.
Very good. Thank you.
Betty?
Yeah, one of I've noticed that has been missing has been something I call common sense. Common sense is something.
I got it.
I'm sorry, I should use my teacher's voice. Common sense is something that I think that it has been missing. We are so zeroed in on ordinances and what we can do and can't do by law and this and that and whatever, that when we try to use common sense, which honestly the comprehensive plan does have a lot of common sense in it, and we try to bring this common sense into what we are voting on or looking at, a development or whatever, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And some of us vote by common sense. And that's one of the problems I think we face. I think common sense is very important, particularly for those of us who grew up here in Middletown, who went to school here in Middletown, and who have family here in Middletown.
That's what I suggest, as fast as we can.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Well said.
Okay, so, Peter, any last comments? I mean, I'm just from a time frame perspective, I just kind of want to recap so that anybody that's here in the audience or as part of the boards here understand that where this is going. From my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, subcommittee will reform for the planning board, the land use subcommittee. They're roughly 75% done. When you have meetings, Billy, what does that mean as far as time? You said-
Excuse me, you have to understand there's more to this than just what the use committee is doing. That is a great committee,
Well,
and
then-
they're doing great work, but there's more to this than just what they're doing. You must understand that.
Well-
And we do have the vision. It's been before us for a long time. We understand the vision.
Show me.
The challenge is getting that vision into the details that ordinances require.
Show me the picture, because I will tell you, that's what worked with the TIF. That's absolutely what worked.
Yes.
Ask any of them. Didn't that work with the TIF? You went the big pictures, we could see it. The
Understood.
council could see it.
Yes, we understand it also.
I understand, Paul, and
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure all of us understand what you guys go through. I'm sure we have a rough idea, but we don't sit in your seat. So,
Forgive me for starting with the details.
that's,
But to me, the vision has been stated over and over again. Liz said that earlier. We've heard the vision. We have the vision. Getting that vision into ordinances is not easy.
no. And that's what we're gonna try to
That's
do.
the challenge.
Right, that's what we're trying to attempt
Yes.
as from a land use perspective. Right.
So Paul, from a process standpoint, I think this will go back to initially to the full planning board, and then the planning board will make a determination as to whether it's the full board or whether some of this will be parceled out to subcommittees, whether it's the land use or whatever. And then the planning board will hold 1 or 2 public hearings with the public over the options that it comes up with, get that feedback, and then eventually that will get distilled down into a draft ordinance that would come back to the council. And as
So-
part of that process, we'll also take a look at other overlay ordinances from other communities in the town that might help to address some of these issues.
Okay, so I would just ask the planning board, because I don't know everything that's on your plate, and I'm sure it's full. Where does this stand as far as priority?
Oh, this is high priority, but
Okay.
it requires time to get things done.
Understood.
We will take the approach, though, of setting up subcommittees to move this as quickly as we can.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair
So,
enough.
Paul, if I could just clarify, excuse me, it's the use table subcommittee that I chair and have no members on. So it's not the land use, there's a distinct difference. It's the use table subcommittee. And I will make a commitment as the chair and the only person on the committee to recruit some additional members. You know
Better get
that,
on it, Billy.
you know that there's only 5 members currently
Yeah,
on the
we
on
need
the planning
members.
board, so we need members.
I
So
understand.
we need to get a full board to do that.
Right, okay.
You know,
very good.
Paul, in all fairness to the planning board,
Yes,
if we're going to start there, that's a huge responsibility. And you've got one planner, and you've got a bunch of good people from the community acting as planning board members. I don't know whether it makes sense, Ron probably knows better than I do, but you might want to ask the possibility of a consultant to come in and look at things and assist the planning board with identifying what it wants to do and how it should do it.
I mean, when I hear the word consultant, I mean,
I
I
know.
think there's a time and place for those people. Maybe if that's what they want to do, then if the council wants to do that, then I'll do that. But I just think it kind of, let's see what comes forward first.
Okay.
I think that's the right thing, because at the end of the day, you know, we represent the people, as you know, we're gonna choose what the people want down there, regardless what a consultant comes up with.
Yeah. I think Ron's,
Because I mean, I appreciate them taking and looking at other areas, and that's important.
yeah.
You know, outside of Middletown, but, you know, Middletown, that particular area is unique. And I don't think there's a lot of areas like that. But I'd rather just have the planning board come back and give us recommendations.
But Paul, there's an awful lot of good happening down there between the
Yes.
TIF and what's happening, so I don't go at this from the position that the sky is falling down there. Some real good things are
Right.
happening.
No, I
And we
agree.
can do better, certainly.
Right.
But it's all good as far as I can see so
Okay,
far.
good.
We want to keep the uniqueness.
Some more common sense.
Okay. Listen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the coming back with some recommendations in the near future. And I appreciate everything everybody does.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to recess?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll be back at 7.
They need 5 minutes to
Wendy,
get these
got
tables
any
out of here.
forms? Wendy, got any